Ways to avoid bicycle accidents, crash prevention tips. Hi, it's Jim Dodson, the Florida Bike Guy. I want to talk to you today about these important things that you can do on your bike that will decrease the chances, even though those are not very high chances, but decrease the chances that you'll have a bike collision. One of the first things that I like to talk about is visibility. And when I was talking visibility, we're talking about the first thing that we can all do every day before we start our ride is put on something that we know is visible to drivers. Remember, drivers are cruising down the road, thinking about 15 things beside watching for you. They're deciding whether to turn or stop or change the radio or talk to someone in the car or make a phone call, whatever is going on. And we need to make sure we're doing all we can to capture their attention when they glance up. We need to be in their field of view, and they need to recognize that we're a cyclist that they need to avoid us. So the highest percentage of likelihood of doing that is wearing high visibility clothing. High visibility to me is fluorescent. In my practice and what I do personally, I generally use high visibility fluorescent yellow everywhere I can get it. And I start with my helmet, which is yellow. I have a jersey, which is yellow or other high visibility fabric. And then we always want to talk about high visibility on your legs and ankles, really, especially on the ankles and around the feet. I did a program not long ago where I found a product at a running store, which was basically a high compression stocking that went from the ankle up to the mid calf, which is bright neon yellow. It's terrific. And the studies are that when you put a high visibility clothing on your ankles, it's the motion of your turning pedals that creates what is called bioemotion. And the eye of the driver recognizes, wow, that's a human. I need to pay attention to this. And using fluorescent colors, they're 2 or 3 times more visible and 2 or 3 times brighter than normal colors. So it's a really important thing to do. The studies are that high visibility colors on your ankles, on your pedal, where the pedal area is, your lower leg, triples the opportunity for a driver to recognize that you're a cyclist. Okay, so these are really important things that you can do. The other thing is to remember, a lot of people understand that they want a light on their bike at night, but using a bright white flashing light on the front of your bike and a bright red pulsing flashing light on the rear significantly increases the odds of being seen by a driver during the daytime. Clearly, you would never ride without one at night. It's illegal. But during the daytime, they're not required, but they are very highly recommended. I'm an advocate for bright. I'm an advocate for bright, blinking red lights, not a weak, wussy light that no one can even see if it's on. You want something that's going to capture their attention. When you see somebody ride by with a great light, stop them. What is that light you've got? Because I think it's something that we sometimes hard to hone in. Different bike shops have different products, and a lot of them are good, and some of them aren't so good. So be conscious about these decisions you make to increase your visibility. The second thing would be lane position. I've talked about this in the past, but lane position is very critical. If you have a bike lane, of course, in Florida, we're required to ride in the bike lane. But I preface that by saying every cyclist has a responsibility to make the decision for their place on the road, which is safest for them at the time and under those conditions, okay? So you have to make that choice. But generally, we ride in the bike lane if it's available. If you don't have a bike lane, and you're on a road, which most roads in Florida are, which is substandard, which means a vehicle could not pass you within the same lane and allow the minimum passing distance. So the cyclist needs at least 5 feet from the road and 3 feet passing. And so most roads, quite frankly, in Florida are substandard. They're less than 14 feet wide. On those roads, any substandard road, you have the right to take the lane. And what does that mean, though? There's some great information on this at Cycling Savvy, SAAVY. They've got a great video information and great courses you can take on lane position, which is really, really critical. They actually recommend taking the lane by riding in the left tire lane, where the left tire leaves an indentation on the road. A lot of people ride on the right. I tend to ride more on the right, but closer to the center. The position that they take, Cycling Savvy takes, and that I know to be true is when you are taking the lane, you tell a driver by your position at the earliest opportunity that they have to go around you. They can't squeeze by. And the greater you are occupying that lane, in other words, the closer you move into the center and even to the left, they need to make that decision more quickly. You have a greater opportunity for them to pass you and wait to pass you by going into the adjacent lane. Putting yourself in a position to take the lane gives people a greater opportunity to see you if they're coming from the opposite direction, they're turning out from the side street, or they're waiting to turn left ahead of you across your lane of traffic. You have a greater opportunity to be seen, particularly if you're wearing high visibility clothing with a high visibility light. So road position is very important. I think so many people want to ride close to the curb. They read the statute as saying as close to the right as practicable. They think that means they need to hug the curb. It does not mean you need to hug the curb. It's actually safer not to do that. I had an example. I was on a bike ride with CAM events up in Volusia County 2 weekends ago. And we're on a road out in the country, 45-mile-an-hour road, no bike lane. I'm in the right wheel line, and a driver's coming from behind in a truck pretty aggressively. There's a car coming from the opposite direction. I held my position until he got right. I mean, I didn't know if he was going to stop or not. So he made me nervous. I moved over to the right. And when I did, he squeezed through the exact thing I did not want him to do. Car was coming the opposite direction. He squeezed through at the same time. It was like heart stopping, I should have held my position, and I didn't do that. So that's my recommendation in terms of lane position. The other thing to do is, remember, number 3, signal every move. If you're in a group ride, this is mandatory. You have to audible, hand signals. You're slowing down, you're turning, you're stopping, you're changing position. These are extremely important to group ride, but also very important to drivers. I am very demonstrative when I ride. I will point to a position where I'm going and tell the driver, I'm going there. I'm going left. I'm very demonstrative. I get right, and I'm not doing the standard only stick on my hand. I want to let them know exactly where I'm going. But it's very important because you need to be predictable. What you don't want to be is unpredictable to the driver. I've actually found recently, going back to lane position for a second, I ride Gulf Boulevard a lot here in Pinellas County, and it's a beautiful place to ride. There's a bike lane where I ride most of the time. If I ride on the lane line between the bike lane and the travel lane, invariably cars give me much greater width. They move into the opposite lane more likely than not. Rarely will a car even stay in the lane next to me. If I ride totally in the bike lane, going to come along beside me all the time. So moving out creates more of an apparent that they need to give you more space. So signal every move. Be clear with your signaling. Be timely with your signaling. Don't be bashful about it. Be demonstrative. The fourth thing, there's data, and I know in our own practice, I always suggest that you avoid arterial roads whenever possible. Arterial roads are those that are moving high volumes of traffic, generally through commercial areas, generally multi-lane, generally higher speeds, above 35, usually 45, sometimes have a bike lane. The problem with these roads are they have generally so many commercial centers and opportunities for cars to turn in or drivers to pull out that they create a tremendous number of contact points between you and a driver trying to execute one of these turns. Things happen much more quickly at higher speeds. So The data, I think, points this out, that we need to avoid, if we can, those arterial roads. There's ways to ride them. Cycling Savvy talks about it. I just know in my own practice, I don't like what I see when people are riding these roads. Number 5, never assume the driver sees you. Okay. I have cases all the time of miscommunication between a driver. The cyclist thinks the car is stopping for him and goes, car goes. When I'm riding, when a car pulls up to a side street, I make sure they stop. If they're not slowing down, I'm slowing down. When they are stopped, I'm watching the wheel. I'm looking at the hubcap. Is that wheel moving? Can I get the driver's attention? Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to tell if the car is moving, but you can tell right away if the wheel is moving. If that wheel starts moving, you've got to do something. So don't always assume, because you're in a place to be seen, that the driver has seen you. Just assume that you need to communicate clearly what you're doing. He's caught your eye. I point at them. Do you see me? Do you see me? That kind of thing. And the last thing would be, I think it's very advisable to ride with a mirror. It's really necessary to ride with a mirror when you're riding a group ride, in my view, because you just need to see who's coming up beside you. And I know that from a data standpoint, the least likely way that you're going to get hurt on your bike is from a car approaching from the rear. That's really one of the lowest percentage of crashes that we see. But I feel much more comfortable personally riding with a mirror because I want to know what's coming up behind me. You can't look at it constantly, but you can look at it frequently. I had a ride I was up in St. Augustine last weekend, and I'm riding on really, what I'm telling is pretty high speed road, but a very wide shoulder, straight road. And it was out in the middle of nowhere. But in my mirror, I see a car coming up behind me. It moved over across the white line into the shoulder area. Of course, that really catches your attention. So I focused on that car until he moved back. When he realized I was there, he focused and moved back. But I know many times you'd be riding along, having a bus or a commercial vehicle pass you suddenly on the left side, particularly if they're not giving you a lot of space, can be really disconcerting. The wrong situation can make you maybe lose control of your bike for a minute. So I always like to know what's coming behind me, and the way to do that is to wear a mirror. One of my good friends, Paul Gagnon, rides with 2 mirrors and tells me that all the time. I think you can't have too much information in that regard. So those are the 6 things that I think that if you do, you definitely decrease the odds that you have any kind of a crash with injuries. I'm Jim Dodson, the Florida Bike Guy. I'm a cycling lawyer helping fellow cyclists in Florida. I'm an active cyclist myself. If you get hurt on the bike, or if you're in the passenger in an automobile or a driver, we're here to help you. We're physically located in Clearwater, but we represent cyclists across Florida. If you need me, call me. We'll be there. You have a great day. Thank you.